All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into the molecules that, well, literally build the boundaries of life itself. Lipids. You probably know them as fats, but as we're about to see, they are so much more. They're the unsung architects of every single living cell.
And let's just kick things off with this, because it really says it all. No lipids, no cells, no life. It's not an exaggeration. I mean, it is that fundamental. Every living thing on this planet owes its existence to these incredible molecules.
Okay, so first up, let's really dig into what a lipid actually is. We're going to explore how its one defining characteristic lets it form the essential barrier that separates the inside of a cell from, well, everything else.
So what is a lipid?
You know, unlike proteins or carbs, which get defined by their specific shapes, lipids are defined by a single behavior. They just don't dissolve in water. And that one single property, being hydrophobic, water-fearing, that's the key to absolutely everything they do.
Seriously, if you've ever tried to make salad dressing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The oil and the vinegar, they just refuse to mix. That simple separation is precisely how lipids build compartments, how they build the walls of our cells in a world that is, for the most part, water.
And their jobs are, well, they're all over the place. They're the structural pieces of all our membranes, which we're going to focus on. They're also super dense energy stores, and they even act as crucial little messengers inside the cell. But to really get how they pull all this off, we got to start with the basics, their fundamental structure.
Okay, so everything, and I mean everything, starts with one simple building block. All these different lipids are constructed from a basic unit called a fatty acid. Get your head around this one molecule, and the rest just kind of falls into place.
So a fatty acid, it's got these two really distinct parts. You've got this long hydrocarbon tail, just a chain of carbon and hydrogen, and it absolutely hates water. And then you've got the carboxylic acid head, which is polar and actually loves to hang out with water. It's this split personality that's the real secret to their power. Now, these fatty acids, they come in two main flavors, saturated and unsaturated. Saturated fats, think butter, have these nice, straight chains that can pack together really tightly. But unsaturated fats, like olive oil, have at least one double bond, and that puts this permanent kink or bend in the chain. This bend keeps them from packing so closely, which is exactly why they're liquid at room temperature. Okay, so the cell has these fatty acids. What does it do with them? Well, it basically assembles them into two major types of molecules for two very different jobs. You can think of them as the cell's fuel tanks and its building bricks.
All right, let's talk fuel tanks. To store up energy, a cell takes a glycerol molecule and attaches three fatty acid chains to it. This creates something called a triacylglycerol. And because this whole thing is hydrophobic, it can be packed super tight without any heavy water molecules getting in the way. It's just pure, compact energy. And the efficiency here, it's just, wow. I mean, gram for gram, breaking down fatty acids gives you more than double the energy you'd get from sugars like glucose. This is why fats are the body's go-to for long-term energy storage. Okay, now for the building bricks. The recipe starts out the same, a glycerol molecule with two fatty acid tails. But here's where things get really interesting. The game changer is, instead of a third fatty acid, the cell sticks on a charged phosphate group. What you end up with is what's called an amphiphilic molecule, one with a water-loving head and two water-fearing tails. And this split personality, that is what leads to what I think is one of the most magical things in all of biology, the spontaneous self-assembly of the cell membrane. And the best part? It just happens, all by itself. No instructions needed, no energy required from the cell. So what's the driving force here? It's something called the hydrophobic effect. And this is the really cool part. It's not that the fatty tails are attracted to each other. No, it's that the water molecules love each other so much that they literally push the nonpolar tails out of the way, forcing them to clump together. It's just the most energy-efficient setup for the whole system. So check this out. This is how it all snaps together. You drop these phospholipids into water, and their tails immediately try to hide. And what's the most stable way for them to do that? They form a bilayer. All the water-loving heads face out towards the water, and all the water-fearing tails get tucked away safely in the middle. And boom, just like that, you've got a perfect self-sealing barrier.
But wait, the membrane isn't just phospholipids. There's another key lipid, cholesterol, that wedges itself right in between them. It kind of acts like a fluidity buffer. It keeps the tails from packing too tightly when it gets cold, but also keeps them from getting too loose and leaky when it's warm. It's basically the ultimate moderator, keeping everything just right. Okay, but a wall isn't very useful if nothing can get through it, right? So the membrane isn't a static wall. It's a dynamic gate, and it's controlled by a whole bunch of specialized proteins.
And you've got two main kinds of these protein gatekeepers. The integral proteins are stuck right there in the lipid bilayer. They're in there for the long haul. Then you have peripheral proteins, which are more loosely attached to the surface. They can kind of pop on and off as needed.
And what they do is absolutely vital. They're the transporters and channels that let specific things in and out. They're the receptors that act like the cell's antennae, picking up signals. And they're the adhesion molecules that help cells stick together to build tissues. They really are the true guardians of the gate.
So, how does stuff actually get across this border? Well, small hydrophobic things like some hormones, they can sneak right through, no problem. But anything that likes water, ions, sugars, no way. They get stopped at the door. They need a protein escort to get them across, which we call facilitated transport. And sometimes that takes energy, and sometimes it doesn't.
So what's the big takeaway here? The main thing to remember is that your cells aren't these rigid, static boxes. They are surrounded by this dynamic, fluid sea of lipids and proteins that are constantly shifting, signaling, and rebuilding. The very fats and proteins you eat become the actual building blocks for this incredible structure. So really, the next time you sit down to eat, just think about that. You're not just eating food, you're gathering the architectural materials for life itself.